Welcome to Business Talk Season 3. Can you believe it? With me, Michael Avery, in partnership now with EY. And it's been fantastic bringing you these insights and stories from South Africa's business leaders through a pandemic and a period like no other in our history. Now, it is a case of rebuilding and emerging from the pandemic. And I read a great quote on a blog the other day. It's not about perfect, it's about effort. And when you bring that effort every single day, that's really where transformation happens. And that's how change happens. And, this is certainly how we approach the task of transforming our businesses. And it resonated with me as we tackle this new sort of buzzword of transformational consulting. And we've got Ashwin Goolab, who's EY Africa Technology Consulting Leader, with us to kick off Season 3. Ashwin, welcome to the show. Firstly, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey within EY and the broader technology consulting space?
Good afternoon, Michael, and thanks very much for having me on your show. It's fantastic to be here talking about digital. So my background really is my current role, of course, at EY, as you just mentioned, is the technology consulting leader across sub-Saharan Africa. And what it really means is that I'm responsible for our technology and all things digital, from an implementation and technology aspect at EY. Prior to this, I have had several roles within EY, one of them being the digital leader for our audit and tax practice as well, which is something quite unorthodox. And also prior to that, I had spent about 30 years in the IT industry, ranging from consulting, ERP type consulting to being the CIO at one of the major banks in Africa.
So you've lived and breathed and walked this digital transformation journey for the last 3 decades, which is really from the very nascent early days of digital transformation. It reminds me, I was chatting to Peter de Villiers of Clickatel, and 20 years ago, they developed something very simple with 4 lines of code, the ability to send text from web to cell phone. And we look at that now in 2021, and we think, well, how could that have been innovative or novel at the time? But it was, and it just shows you how much we've evolved over the last 20 years. Now, as we emerge from this pandemic, I think gone are the days of sitting down, designing a technology strategy, and then implementing. Things are moving so fast. And you mentioned it on LinkedIn the other day. We're almost designing the plane as we're flying it. What does this mean in practical terms?
Yeah, great question, Michael. I think, as you mentioned, we're living in absolutely exponential times, and change and constant agility is almost becoming the order of the day. And I think in response to this, we believe that to be successful in the future now, a different mindset and approach is needed to the way we used to approach these challenges in the past. And we like to call this a transformation mindset. Now, what is a transformation mindset and how is it different from the past? For us, a transformation mindset is about measuring the size of the impact that you make as a result of your transformation journey, rather than the traditional way of measuring the size of your project that you undertake. And of course, this is underpinned by a very high level of digital and innovation components. Now, we believe that there's 3 key drivers to achieving this transformational impact, and that is technology, humans, and innovation. But we take it a step further by qualifying each of these drivers so it becomes technology at speed, humans at the center, and innovation at scale. And I think we believe that if you have these 3 ingredients, then the combination of these 3, it gives you the ability to achieve true transformation.
And I like the fact that you put humans at the center of that, because I think so often you can approach things from a technology or an innovation perspective, but if you don't get your people to buy in, if you don't get that culture transformed inside your organization, no amount of new technology on that stack is really going to deliver the right sort of outcomes here. With increasing pressure to innovate and to become leaner and more focused in the face of this global downturn, what are some of those steps or processes that organizations can undertake just to identify what's most essential in terms of this transformational journey, to say, right, these are the cores we need to focus on?
So Michael, I think, when you listen to, technology, customer, and innovation, it starts suspiciously sounding like, the old consulting of people, process, and technology. So, sometimes our industry, the technology industry in particular, is infamous for giving new names to old things. But I can promise you this time it is fundamentally different from how we used to do things in the past in several ways. Now, before I talk about the steps, perhaps we should just contextualize, the whole digital versus innovation discussion and what it means as a sort of a level setting discussion. So for me, when we talk digital, most people, almost relate it synonymously with technology. And I think you just alluded to something earlier where you said, oh, that's interesting. There's a customer at center. There's a people angle to this. And I'm sure that we all have our favorite definition of what digital actually means. But for me personally, digital is a pathway to innovation, right? And innovation then is the creative solving of a business problem, usually using technology. Now, as you just heard, I'm a technologist. I mean, I started off as a programmer 30 years ago, interestingly enough. And, throughout my career, I've always been exposed to technology, but I'll be the first one to say that digital is not only about the technology. Of course, it's an important part of transformation, but it's not the only part, right? So I'll give you a little example, right? Do you think that inventors of Uber woke up one morning and said, well, I have a phone, I have a GPS, and I have a network. What can I do with this? I think it's highly unlikely, right? The more likely scenario is one where they probably said, well, we have many empty cars on the road. We have people that need to get to places. How best can we solve that problem? So I think that's the first starting point, right? It's a good starting point for a transformation journey is to understand the challenge that you're actually trying to solve for. And then the next step really is we believe that all solutions that we implement, all transformation journeys that we undertake must have a solid, tangible business case with a clear ROI that can be measured in the immediate to short term. And I think that's the key word, the immediate to short term. I think those days of long multi-year projects where you have to wait several years to derive any benefit are absolutely long gone. And funding for projects is scarce. We know that, right? We've just seen it as a number one response on the poll. And we believe that it's important to start reaping this return on investment as early as possible in your transformation journey. Now, I'm going to cover a little bit more about how we actually achieve that, the whole investment versus return objective a little bit later on. As the whole funding issue, I think, was very, very topical on the poll, and I think it's something that we should cover in a bit of depth. So that's the first starting point. Then I think something else that's different is, the way we gather requirements. So in the past, we used to have these workshops with the users, and then we never see them again until we give them a solution. Today, gathering requirements is fundamentally different, right? We use design thinking. We place the customer at the center of our solution. We look at the problem inside out, outside in. We use concepts like future back, where you actually have a future state view of what the end should look like. And then you work backwards to actually get to the design outcome. And we find that when you use these kinds of techniques, it produces a more robust design of requirements, using personas and keeping the customer at the center of our focus. And that is key to having a very solid design as a starting point. Then, of course, once this is all designed, we move on to the implementation phase. And here, everything has changed, right? In the traditional implementation way, we used to use waterfall as our approach, where you only start seeing results at the end of the full project lifecycle. Now, today, we use a rapid agile process, and we envisage go lives within weeks of starting the project. And then again, on average, every few weeks thereafter. And we release what we call a minimum viable product. And I think this is quite key, right? And what this means is that you start reaping your investment return early on in the project, and you're getting benefits, before the project actually concludes. Now, this builds confidence. It becomes self-funding projects where you can start, recovering and realizing benefits and actually cover the cost of the initial implementation before the project even concludes. And I think this hopefully answers the funding question, right? It's a fundamental, investment versus return question.
And I think that is critical. I mean, just to stop on that point for a second, if you're going to cut through perhaps a layer of skepticism that may exist out there, because there have been many bodies on the shores of previously tried and failed projects. I mean, you're now talking to a potentially more cynical or hardened executive that are holding those key decisions around budgets and purse strings. I think that's a critical way of getting through that inertia and unlocking it.
And the way then to measure whether you've actually been successful, and I think executives buy into this, that let's see a business case first. And you're right, it just gives them a level of confidence to then embark on the next step. But once you're then into the implementation phase, right, the next principle today that we see that is very different from the past is some of the technology tools that we have available. It is absolutely astounding. You can use tools today that give you a rapid acceleration of results, right? You have deliverables, you have methodologies, you have templates, you have frameworks, and you have so many no-code and low-code platforms that are available today that, again, all this does is just allows you to accelerate the development of your minimum viable product and hit the ground running in the development of the actual final end product. So again, this talks to your return on investment being recovered very, very rapidly, sometimes in the same financial year that you actually start. And then lastly, I think, the whole concept of scale. Digital solutions, they only add significant value when there's large-scale adoption and then some capability that you need to retain to continuously evolve your solution that you built as a minimum viable product, right? In addition to the mass rollout of the solution, this also talks somewhat to the new ways of working in the organization, right? The whole humans at center. When you have a sustainable competency that you need to leave behind to continue enhancing this minimum viable product that you've started building and that you've already released to the customer. So I think hopefully you can see, putting all these things together from the business case all the way to the rapid, compressed, accelerated rollouts, while still achieving all your usability, commercial, and sustainability objectives, it actually gives you quick solutions and quick transformation.
And speed here is really taking lessons that were developed, I think, in Silicon Valley. If you think of the entrepreneurs and those ideas were brought to market very quickly, the successful ideas were iterated upon. If you think about the first clunky versions of social media and MySpace, and we saw these things develop very quickly, go to market, and then they were refined and they're continually refined still to this day. But you can't wait for perfect before you press the go button. Can you just share an example of how you see this kind of process playing out in real life today?
Sure, Michael. Just before we go there, you mentioned something about, we have this saying at EY that, done is better than perfect. And you're absolutely right. If you have a cell phone today, I'm sure you've noticed you get asked to update your apps every now and then. And that is exactly it. It's starting off with a minimum viable product that is usable at the bare minimum. And then you just keep on adding to this via updates. So I think that's the way to go. And that's something that's different, from the past. But let me give you a very recent example. As you know, due to the lockdown, people are clearly using their motor vehicles, a lot less. And this means that their risk profile is now lower from an insurance perspective. And they could definitely benefit from lower insurance premiums. Now, very recently, probably about a year ago, we worked with a major short-term insurer to create a solution from inception to minimum viable product of a usage-based insurance solution. And this uses a chatbot digital channel as a way to get to the customer. Now, what the solution does is it allows this insurer to reach the clients digitally in a very easy manner. It allows the clients to be onboarded, authenticated in an easy way. It allows the client to submit a picture of their car's dashboard using their mobile phones, to benefit from the low premium. And it does all this using a simple messaging channel that we're all familiar with, like WhatsApp, for instance. Now, the important point here is the transformation methodology I've just described above, right? We were able to put together a multidisciplinary team consisting of actuarial guys, technical guys, business experts, and we were able to roll out this minimum viable product to the client base of the insurer in a grand total of 15 working days from inception to go live with a team of roughly 5 people. Now, once they have this minimum viable product, you can well imagine now the additional benefits is that the solution can be continuously enhanced beyond, just this getting the dashboard reading. They now have a channel, a direct channel to the client, which they can use for surveys, for special offers, for claims processing, and any other client touch points. And we believe that if we had used a traditional approach, traditional tool sets, traditional implementation methodology for this challenge, our insurer would have been significantly behind the curve and actually lost market share. And so, there's your business case again. Yeah. Fortunately, this insurer was forward-thinking and was prepared to try this approach with us, and it worked out really well for all parties involved.
15 days is absolutely remarkable. I mean,
And we amazed ourselves.
yeah, that is going great guns at it. But I think also demonstrates the need to partner with people who have the right skills, and it's something that's emerging through COVID as well. The need to collaborate, because nobody can have all of those skills in house.
Absolutely, yeah. So, one of the challenges that organizations tell us is that, and I see that this the second most popular poll question is that there's a shortage of skills. And absolutely, I mean, digital skills are in short supply, and there are ways around that, by partnering with other people, as you say, by collaborating with other people in the industry where the skills actually are, by looking abroad, by looking offshore. But certainly there are ways to address that without building the capability completely in-house. But, where do you start with this is really the question I get asked quite often. And if you broadly look at the three models of innovation, you get what we call adjacent innovation on the one end. And on the other end of the scale, you get what we call disruptive innovation. And then, of course, you get incremental innovation smack bang in the middle there. Now, just very briefly, adjacent innovation is broadly about optimizing what you already do today for existing clients.
Yeah.
Then you get incremental innovation, which is about leveraging something that you do well today into maybe a new space or new market. And then finally, you get your disruptive innovation, which is about doing something completely new markets, new clients, a new product. And you can almost think of something disruptive like an Uber or a Bitcoin or a Facebook, something that's never existed before. Now, and again, I'm talking completely from experience here, but as an organization, once you've decided to embrace the whole innovation journey, it's very tempting to start looking for that next Uber type innovation, your next Facebook or Bitcoin or that type of app, shall we say. And this we find is exactly where organizations come unstuck and end up giving up on the digital agenda. Because you see, innovation is also about making many mistakes and experimenting extensively before you find something that works.
Right.
And particularly for the disruptive innovation piece, this is a resource-intensive process. And so my advice in my own personal experience is rather start at adjacent innovation. Do the things you are doing today well. I mean, go for the low-hanging fruit. You get immediate returns, your projects become self-funding, your confidence grows, your digital team's confidence grows, and you start moving confidently into the next model of innovation. And this then successfully starts you on your digital capability journey. And you start building an organization which has got the right kind of skills.
I think that's a great bit of advice, because many companies don't know exactly where to start. And the universe, as you just described it, is so large that it's so tempting to say, well, if you're talking innovation, you've got to go and you've got to invent something entirely new, go after new markets. But the idea that you can rather just improve internal processes, start adjacent, work incrementally, and then end up with that big, hairy, audacious goal at the end. I think that is exactly the way we should be doing things. Now, we've covered cost. When it comes to strategy, where does strategy sit in all of this process? Because you want to move quickly, but you also want to have an overall strategy at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So maybe the question is, what is the ultimate end game? Where is all this going? So what we're seeing today is that in many organizations, they are what we call doing digital. And by that, we mean that there are pockets of digital projects that are not linked by any particular strategy, independently run across the organization. And this is what we mean by doing digital. And so where we want to fundamentally shift organizations is from doing digital to being digital. And so being digital implies ultimately, a culture where you have digital first type thinking, and digital thinking is systemic in the actual organization. So I think I mentioned earlier that, as an example, for every 10 innovative ideas you have, one may work. And this implies that you need to allow your people the freedom to fail. Now, there's an interesting concept, right? The freedom to fail. Whose KPI allows them to fail? You fail once in an organization, you get wrapped in the knuckles, you never give another innovative idea again. So, the best ideas for innovation will come from the people in your organization already. So what you need to do is to tap into that wealth of ideas. And you need to find techniques like hackathons to generate new ideas and somehow incentivize people in various ways to be creative and come up with these ideas. And this, I think, requires a massive cultural shift as you adapt to new ways of working, new tools, and a culture of experimentation and learning. But ultimately, I think if you do this, you will start reaping the rewards and having a more nimble and agile organization.
Wish we could take those lessons and encode them into the DNA of our schools, because I also think our schooling system doesn't embrace the learning journey through failing. And everything is about success, and you're graded to succeed and to pass, and failing is seen as bad. Then you go into the world of work, and as entrepreneurs, you've got to fail a few times. And they say, in Silicon Valley, if you approach a VC, Sequoia Capital, and you haven't failed once or twice, they don't want to touch you, because it's through that process that demonstrates that you're trying new things, that you're willing to experiment, and that really is in the DNA of innovation as well. Ashwin, a great pleasure sharing those insights. Fantastic. And you convinced me that this is not just another buzzword when we talk about transformational consulting. It really is something new and innovative within that space as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Michael, thank you very much for having me. It was great chatting to you.
That was Ashwin Goolab, EY Africa Technology Consulting Leader, with the first episode of Season 3 of Business Talk with me, Michael Avery.